Your hand has never touched another human being. Not once. The atoms in your fingers and the atoms in your lover's skin, they repel each other before contact, held apart by electromagnetic force. You've never touched your mother, never touched the ground. You're floating through life, suspended in force fields, forever alone at the atomic level. But here's what haunts me. If matter never truly meets, then what is contact? What is intimacy? What you call touching is just forces talking to each other, fields negotiating, energies exchanging information. Connection isn't physical. It never was. So maybe loneliness isn't what you think it is either. Look, I need you to sit with that for a second. Really sit with it. Because I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, okay, Feynman, that's a neat physics trick, very clever, but come on, I can feel my hands right now. I can feel the chair I'm sitting in. This is real. This is solid. And I get it. I really do. Your entire experience of life tells you that the world is made of stuff. Hard stuff. Real stuff. Matter that you can touch and hold and lean on. But here's the thing. And this is why I've spent my whole life trying to explain this, why I'm talking to you right now. That intuition, that feeling of solidity, is the most elaborate magic trick the universe has ever pulled off. And once you see through it, once you really understand what's actually happening, when you think you're touching something, when you think you're made of something solid, everything changes. Your relationships change. Your fear of death changes. Your understanding of who and what you are changes completely. And I'm not talking about some mystical woo-woo here. I'm talking about physics, hard, experimental, tested 1,000,000 times physics. The kind of physics that built the computer or phone you're watching this on. This isn't philosophy. This is as real gets. It's just that real is so much stranger than you've been told. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to explain to you what reality is actually made of. Not the simplified story you got in high school, not the metaphors, not the dumbed-down version, the actual truth, but in a way that makes sense, in a way that connects to your life, to your heart, to the things you're struggling with right now. Because here's what nobody tells you. The reason you feel anxious all the time, the reason you can't find yourself, the reason relationships feel so hard, a lot of that comes from a fundamental misunderstanding about what you are. You think you're a solid thing in a world of solid things, and you're trying to navigate life with that broken map. But you're not solid. You never were. And once you really get that, not just intellectually, but in your bones, you stop fighting reality and start dancing with it. The loneliness eases. The control issues relax. You start to see that you've been the ocean all along, just pretending to be a wave, desperate to get back to water you never left. Now, I know I'm throwing a lot at you right here at the beginning, so let me back up and tell you why this matters. Why should you care that your hand never actually touches anything? Why does it matter what reality is made of? You've got bills to pay. You've got relationships to navigate. You've got that weird pain in your back that won't go away, and that thing your boss said last week that you can't stop thinking about. What does quantum physics have to do with any of that? Everything. It has everything to do with it. See, you've been sold a lie about reality that's making you suffer. You think the universe is made of solid, separate things, objects with clear boundaries, including you. This belief creates a prison. You feel isolated because you think you're a separate object. You fear death as annihilation because you think you're a thing that can end. You try to control and possess what you think are things, your money, your partner, your body, your identity, because things can be owned and controlled and kept safe. But quantum physics revealed a secret about 100 years ago that barely anyone has emotionally internalized. Are you ready? Here it is. Matter isn't fundamental. Interaction is. The universe isn't made of stuff that interacts. It's made of interaction that occasionally looks like stuff. Let me say that again because it's the most important sentence in this whole video. The universe is made of interaction that occasionally looks like stuff. What does that mean? It means that when you think you're touching your lover's hand, what's actually happening is this. The electrons in your skin and the electrons in their skin are getting close enough that their electromagnetic fields interact. They repel each other, like two magnets with the same pole facing each other. That repulsion, that force, that interaction, that's what you experience as touch. But the actual matter, the actual particles, never meet. They can't meet. They're not solid little balls that can bump into each other. They're not even really particles in the way you think of particles. And here's where it gets really interesting. That interaction, that exchange of electromagnetic force, that's not just how you experience touch. That's what touch is. There's no deeper reality underneath it. The interaction is the reality. The force talking to the force, the field responding to the field, that's what's real. The matter you think is doing the touching? That's almost like an illusion, a shorthand your brain uses to make sense of what's actually an incredibly complex dance of forces and fields. Now, I can see you getting uncomfortable. You're thinking, if nothing ever touches, then what is anything? What am I? If I'm not solid, if I'm not a thing, then what the hell am I? And that's the question. That's the question that's going to set you free. But before I answer it, I need to show you something. I need to take you on a little journey through one of the most beautiful and disturbing experiments in the history of science. Because this experiment, and I'm talking about the double-slit experiment, this is the moment when we realized that reality doesn't work the way we thought it did. This is when the universe pulled back the curtain and showed us something so strange that we're still trying to wrap our heads around it. Picture this. We've got a light source, a barrier with two slits cut in it, and a screen on the other side to catch whatever comes through. Simple, right? Now, we shine light at those two slits. What happens? We get an interference pattern on the screen, alternating bands of light and dark. You've probably seen this if you've ever looked at light shining through window blinds or through your fingers held close together. That pattern tells us light is a wave. Waves from the two slits overlap, and where they line up, where a peak meets a peak, you get bright light. Where a peak meets a trough, they cancel out, and you get darkness. Makes sense. Light is a wave. But then, and this is where it gets weird, we turn down the intensity of the light. Way down. So far down that we're sending one photon through at a time, one single particle of light. Now, if light is made of particles, each photon has to go through one slit or the other. Right? It can't go through both. That would be like saying you walked through two different doorways at the same time. Impossible. So we expect to see two bright bands on the screen, one behind each slit. That's what you'd get if you threw tennis balls at two openings. But that's not what happens. Even when we send one photon at a time, we still get the interference pattern. Dozens of bands, the pattern you only get when waves are going through both slits and interfering with each other. So each photon, each single particle of light, is somehow going through both slits at once. It's interfering with itself. It exists in two places simultaneously, behaving like a wave spread out through space, not a particle localized at one point. Now, being good scientists, we think, okay, we'll just measure which slit it goes through. We'll catch it in the act. So we set up detectors at each slit to see which one the photon passes through. And the moment we do that, the instant we try to measure which path the photon takes, the interference pattern disappears. We get two bands. The photon acts like a particle, going through one slit or the other, but never both. Let me make sure you understand how absolutely bonkers this is. When we're not looking, the photon behaves like a wave, going through both slits. When we are looking, it behaves like a particle, going through one. The act of observation changes what the photon is, and it's not our equipment disturbing it. We've done this experiment in every way you can imagine, with every level of care and sophistication. The conclusion is unavoidable. The photon doesn't have a definite position, a definite path, until we measure it. Before measurement, it exists in what we call superposition. It's in all possible positions at once, taking all possible paths simultaneously. It's a cloud of probability, not a thing. And when we measure it, all those possibilities collapse into one actuality. The wave function collapses, we say. The universe makes a choice. But here's the part that haunts me, the part that kept me up at night for years. What counts as observation? What collapses the wave function? Is it conscious awareness? Is it any interaction with any particle? We don't know. We still don't know. And that uncertainty is terrifying and liberating at the same time. Now you might be thinking, okay, photons are weird, quantum stuff is weird. But I'm not a photon. I'm a person. I'm big. I'm made of trillions of atoms. Surely all this weirdness averages out at my scale, right? Wrong. You are quantum. Every atom in your body follows these same rules. Every electron, every proton, every quark. They're all in superposition, all behaving like probability clouds, all refusing to be definite things until they interact with something else. You're not exempt from this. You are this. And this is where the physics stops being abstract and starts being about you, about your life, about that feeling you have right now. You know that feeling when you're alone in your apartment and you're one way. Maybe you're dancing to music or talking to yourself or doing something weird and private. And then someone walks in and instantly you become someone different. You snap into a different mode, a different personality. And sometimes you feel like that first version was more real, more you, and the second version is the mask you put on for other people. But what if I told you that's not you being fake? That's you being quantum. You exist differently depending on who's observing. Your identity isn't a fixed thing sitting inside you, waiting to be discovered. It's a response pattern. It's a set of possibilities that collapse into specific behaviors when you're witnessed, when you interact with someone else. The electron isn't weird. You are the electron. You're in superposition, all possible versions of yourself existing simultaneously, until context, until relationship, until observation collapses you into one version. And then the interaction ends, and you dissolve back into possibility, ready to become something else in the next moment. This isn't a metaphor. I'm not being poetic. This is literally what's happening. You're not a fixed entity with a true core self that you're trying to find or express. You're a process, a pattern of interactions, constantly collapsing and re-emerging based on context. And once you really get this, once you stop trying to find your true self and start recognizing that you're different things in different contexts, and all of them are real, oh man, the relief. The shame drops away. Because you're not being inauthentic. You're being quantum. You're doing exactly what everything in the universe does. Let me tell you a story. When I was working on the Manhattan Project, I was in Los Alamos with some of the most brilliant minds on the planet. And at night, sometimes we'd talk about this stuff, about what quantum mechanics means, about what we are. And I remember one conversation with Niels Bohr. He said something that stuck with me. He said, "If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics." And at first I thought he was just being mystical, doing that thing where physicists try to sound profound. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized he was pointing at something crucial. The problem isn't that quantum mechanics is hard math, though it is. The problem is that it violates every intuition you have about reality. Your brain evolved to deal with medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds. Rocks, trees, predators, prey. Your intuition is built for that scale. But at the quantum scale, and at the cosmological scale, reality doesn't behave the way your intuition expects. So when I tell you that you're not made of solid matter, that you're a pattern of interactions, that you're more like a verb than a noun, your brain rebels. It feels wrong. It feels like I'm playing word games or trying to be clever, but I'm not. I'm trying to get you to see what's actually there when you look closely enough. Let me try a different angle. Imagine you're standing at the beach, looking at the ocean, and you see a wave rolling in, a big, beautiful wave, and you point at it and you say, "Look at that wave is Bob, and that one behind it, that's Sarah." Now, that sounds ridiculous, right? Waves aren't separate from the ocean. They're not independent entities. They're temporary patterns, excitations, movements of the whole. The wave is the ocean doing something. It's the ocean waving. When the wave crashes on the shore and disappears, did Bob die? Did Bob go somewhere? No. The pattern dissolved, the energy redistributed, but the water is still there. The ocean is still there. The wave was never separate from the ocean to begin with. Now, you are a wave in a field. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it literally, physically as anything can be. The universe, at its most fundamental level, isn't made of particles, it's made of fields. The electromagnetic field, the electron field, the quark field, these fields permeate all of space. They're not in space, they're what space is. They're the fabric of reality. And particles, what we call particles, are just excitations in these fields. They're places where the field is vibrating, oscillating, getting excited enough to look like something. An electron isn't a little ball moving through space, it's a persistent excitation in the electron field. A photon isn't a particle of light flying from the sun to your eye. It's a ripple, a quantum of excitement in the electromagnetic field. And you? You're not made of particles. You're a standing wave, a persistent pattern of excitation in multiple fields at once. The electron field, the quark field, the electromagnetic field. All interacting, all maintaining this complex, stable pattern that you experience as your body, yourself. You're not made of stuff. You're a process. You're the universe doing a very specific, very complex dance in a localized region of space. And it maintains that pattern not because there's some solid stuff holding it together, but because the interactions keep happening. The fields keep exciting each other. The pattern persists because it's stable, because all the forces balance out in just the right way. And here's the part that should blow your mind. The matter you think is solid, the thing you think is you, is just where the field is excited. It's not separate from the field. It's not riding on the field like a surfer on a wave. It is the field, in a particular state. You are the ocean waving. And when you die, when this particular pattern dissolves, the field doesn't go anywhere. The energy redistributes into other patterns, other waves. The ocean continues. You were never born. The pattern emerged like a wave rising. And when you die, you won't disappear. The pattern will dissolve like a wave falling. But the ocean was always you anyway. You're not going anywhere because you were never separate to begin with. Now I can feel you resisting this. Part of you is going, but I feel solid. I feel separate. I feel like me, like this particular individual, distinct from everything else. And you're right. You do feel that way. But that feeling is a useful fiction your brain creates to navigate the world. It's not a lie, exactly. It's more like a user interface. Think about the icons on a computer screen. You've got a little trash can icon, right? And you drag files to it to delete them. Now, is there actually a tiny trash can inside your computer? No, that's absurd. The trash can is an interface, a simplified representation that lets you interact with complex underlying processes you don't need to understand. The real process involves bits being marked as overwritable in memory sectors, but you don't need to know that. You just need the icon. Your sense of being a solid, separate self is like that trash can icon. It's your brain's interface for navigating reality. Underneath, you're a quantum field excitation, a pattern of interactions, a wave in an ocean. But that's too complex, too fluid, too weird to operate with on a day-to-day basis. So your brain creates this simplified model. You're a thing. You're in here, the world is out there. You can touch things, you can move through space. Simple, clean, useful. But just like the person who thinks there's really a trash can in their computer might misunderstand how to recover deleted files, when you take your self-model too seriously, when you forget it's just an interface, you suffer. You try to make the wave permanent. You try to separate yourself from the ocean. You try to control the pattern, to freeze it, to make it stay. And you can't, because that's not what you are. Let me tell you something that happened to me. I was maybe 35, and I was going through a divorce. My first marriage was falling apart, and I felt like I was losing myself. You know that feeling? Like you built your identity around this relationship, this role. And now that it's ending, who are you? What are you? I felt like I was dissolving, like the boundaries of who I was were blurring, and I was terrified. And one night I was lying in bed, couldn't sleep, and I started thinking about this stuff, about quantum mechanics, about fields, about what we really are. And I realized, and it was like a physical sensation, like something unlocking in my chest. I realized I'd been trying to be a particle when I was actually a wave. I'd been trying to have a fixed position, a definite momentum, a clear identity. But that's not what anything in the universe is. Everything is in flux, everything is relational, everything is context-dependent. And instead of that being terrifying, it was liberating. Because it meant I wasn't broken. I wasn't falling apart. I was just changing the way everything changes, the way everything has always changed. The pattern that was Richard married to his wife was dissolving, and a new pattern was emerging. Same ocean, different wave. And it was going to be okay. It was all going to be okay because I couldn't actually be destroyed. I could only be transformed. Now, I'm not saying my divorce was easy after that realization. It wasn't. It was still painful. Relationships ending hurt, and they should hurt because they matter. But underneath the pain, there was this strange peace, this sense that I was doing what the universe does. I was waving, and it was okay to wave. So let's get practical. Let's talk about what this means for how you live your life. Because I don't want this to just be interesting. I want it to change something for you. First, let's talk about control. You know that feeling when you're trying to hold on to something, a relationship, a job, a version of yourself, and it's slipping away and you're gripping tighter and tighter, and it's still slipping and you're panicking? That's you trying to violate the uncertainty principle. In quantum mechanics, Heisenberg showed that you can't know both the position and momentum of a particle with perfect precision. The more accurately you measure where something is, the less you know about where it's going. This isn't a limitation of our instruments. It's fundamental. The universe doesn't have both pieces of information simultaneously. A particle doesn't have a definite position and a definite momentum at the same time. And here's where this connects to your life. The more you try to fix something in place, to define it, to nail it down, the less you can understand its becoming, its movement, its change. The more you try to control your partner, to know exactly where they are and what they're thinking and what they're going to do, the less you can appreciate their growth, their evolution, their freedom. The more you try to define yourself, I am this kind of person, I always do this, I never do that, the less you can respond to new situations, learn new things, become someone different. Control is violence. I don't mean physical violence, I mean it's violence against the quantum nature of reality. It's trying to make particles be particles all the time when they want to be waves. It's trying to collapse the wave function permanently when it wants to spread back out into superposition. And the tragedy is that the more you try to control, the less you actually have. Because what you're trying to control is a wave, and waves can't be held. They can only be ridden, danced with, allowed. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you're in a relationship and you're feeling insecure. You're worried your partner is drifting away, or interested in someone else, or falling out of love with you. And your instinct is to try to nail things down. You want to have the talk. You want to define the relationship. You want to know exactly where you stand, where they stand, what this is, what it's going to be. and sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes clarity is good, but often what you're actually doing is trying to collapse the wave function out of fear. You're trying to measure, to pin down, to control, and the act of measuring changes the thing. Your partner, who was in a complex superposition of feelings, attracted to you, and also stressed about work, and also thinking about their future, and also remembering their ex, and also feeling close to you, and also needing space, gets forced to collapse all of that into a simple answer. Yes, I love you, or I'm not sure. And whatever answer they give is incomplete because you forced the measurement too early, before the pattern was ready to settle. What's the alternative? It's not to ignore your feelings. It's not to just be passive and hope things work out. It's to recognize that relationships are quantum. They exist in superposition. Your partner is many things to you simultaneously, and you to them, and the relationship is constantly collapsing and re-expanding based on every interaction. You can influence the pattern through kindness, through presence, through vulnerability. But you can't control it. You can dance with it, but you can't pin it down. And when you stop trying to pin it down, when you let it wave, something interesting happens. The anxiety eases, not because you suddenly have certainty, but because you stop fighting the fundamental nature of what a relationship is. You stop trying to turn a wave into a particle. This applies to your relationship with yourself, too. You've probably spent a lot of time trying to figure yourself out, right? Trying to find your purpose, your passion, your true self. And maybe you've noticed that the harder you look, the more elusive it becomes. That's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because you're trying to measure something that's in superposition. You are not a fixed entity with a true nature waiting to be discovered. You're a probability cloud, constantly collapsing into different versions based on context. At work, you collapse into worker you. With your parents, you collapse into child you. With your friends, you collapse into friend you. Alone at 3 a.m, you collapse into existential crisis you. And all of these are real. None of them is more authentic than the others. They're all legitimate collapses of the wave function that is you. The suffering comes when you think one of these is the real you and the others are fake. When you think the me at work is the mask and the me alone at 3 a.m. is the truth. No, they're both you. They're both real. You're quantum. You're different things in different contexts, and that's not a bug. It's a feature. It's how reality works at every scale. So stop trying to find yourself. Stop trying to pin yourself down. Instead, get curious about how you collapse in different contexts. Notice, oh, with this person I become playful. With that person I become serious. When I'm creating, I become absorbed. When I'm scared, I become small. Just notice. Don't judge. Don't try to change it or fix it or find the real you underneath. Just watch the wave collapse and expand, collapse and expand. That's what you are. That's what everything is. Now let's talk about loneliness, because if you've really been listening, you might be feeling more alone right now. If nothing ever touches, if we're all just force fields repelling each other, separated by empty space at the atomic level, then aren't we fundamentally isolated? Aren't we forever apart? And I want to tell you, yes. And no. Both. It's a paradox. And the paradox is the truth. Yes, at the level of matter, you're separate. The atoms that make up your body never touch the atoms that make up another body. There's always that gap, that tiny space where electromagnetic forces push against each other and create the sensation you call touch. In that sense, you're alone. You're an island of excitation in the field, distinct from other islands. But at the level of fields, you're not separate at all. The electromagnetic field doesn't stop at your skin. It extends out infinitely, getting weaker with distance but never reaching zero. Right now, the electromagnetic field that's excited in the pattern you call your body is overlapping with the electromagnetic field excited in the pattern of everyone and everything around you. You're immersed in other people's fields. They're immersed in yours. You're constantly interacting, constantly exchanging virtual photons, constantly influencing each other at the quantum level. And more than that. And this is the part that gets really weird. The fields that make you up aren't yours. There's not a separate electron field for you and a separate electron field for me. There's one electron field, and we're both excitations in it. We're both waves in the same ocean. The ocean is waving you into existence, and it's waving me into existence, and it's waving everyone into existence simultaneously. So the answer to, am I alone, is, the question doesn't make sense. You're not a thing that could be alone or not alone. You're a pattern in a field that includes everyone and everything. You're the universe looking at itself from a particular vantage point. Loneliness, then, that feeling you have sometimes, that ache, isn't about physical separation. It's about informational separation. It's about being in a state where there's not enough interaction, not enough exchange of information with other patterns. An electron only has properties when it interacts with something. In isolation, it's not anything at all. Same with you. You become real, you become specific, you become yourself through interaction with others. This is why solitary confinement is torture. It's not just psychologically difficult, it's ontologically diminishing. To exist less relationally is to exist less fully. You're not just lonely when you're isolated, you're less actualized, you're less collapsed into definite being. You're spreading out into vague possibility, and it feels like dying because in a very real sense, it is. Not physical death, but a fading of definition, a loss of specificity. And this is why connection heals. Not just emotionally, but fundamentally. When someone sees you, really sees you, they're measuring you. They're collapsing your wave function. They're making you real in a way you can't make yourself real. You become more definite, more actual, more existing through their witnessing. And when you witness them back, you give them the same gift. You make each other real. Love, then, isn't just an emotion. It's an ontological act. It's the universe recognizing itself, one pattern seeing another pattern and saying, I see you. You're real. You matter. And matter here has a double meaning. You matter. You're significant. And you matter. You become more material, more actual, more collapsed into being through being seen. This is why the worst thing you can do to someone isn't to hurt them. It's to ignore them, to treat them as if they don't exist. Because in a very real sense, you're reducing their existence. You're refusing to collapse their wave function. You're leaving them in superposition, vague, uncertain, less real. And this is why presence is such a gift. Real presence, where you're fully here, fully attentive, fully witnessing. That's not just being nice. That's making someone exist more fully. That's quantum mechanics expressed as compassion. Let me tell you about my second wife, Gwyneth. When I met her, I was still doing that thing where I tried to keep parts of myself separate, protected. I had my physicist self and my personal self, and I kept them in different boxes. And she wouldn't let me do that. She'd ask about my work, really ask, want to understand it, even though she wasn't a scientist. And she'd share her life with me in a way that demanded I show up fully, not just the parts I thought were acceptable. And I remember thinking, this is uncomfortable. She's seeing too much. She's measuring me too accurately. But what was actually happening is she was making me more real. She was collapsing all the different versions of me into one integrated pattern. And yeah, that was vulnerable. Yeah, that was scary, because when someone really sees you, all of you, you can't hide in superposition anymore. You have to be actual. But the gift, oh, the gift of that. To be fully seen and fully loved, not despite being fully seen, but because of it. To have someone look at all the different ways you collapse in different contexts and say, yes, all of that, I love all of that. That's what it means to be human. That's what it means to matter. So if you're feeling lonely right now, here's what I want you to understand. You're not lonely because you're separate. You're lonely because you're not interacting enough. You're lonely because you're trying to be a particle when you need to be a wave. You're trying to be self-contained when you're actually a pattern that only exists through relationship. And the solution isn't to find someone to complete you. You're not incomplete. You're not missing a piece. The solution is to recognize that you're always already connected at the field level, and to actualize that connection through interaction. Talk to people. Really talk. Let them see you. See them back. Exchange information. Collapse each other's wave functions. Make each other real. And here's something subtle but important. You can do this with a tree. You can do this with the ocean. You can do this with a piece of music. Anything you give your full attention to, you're interacting with. You're exchanging information with. You're making real. And it's making you real in return. Loneliness isn't about being physically alone. It's about being in a state of low interaction, low information exchange. You can be lonely in a crowd if you're not really connecting. You can be deeply fulfilled alone in nature if you're really present, really interacting with the patterns around you. Now let's talk about death, because if you've really been following me, you're probably starting to wonder, if I'm just a pattern, if I'm just a wave in a field, then what happens when I die? And I'm going to tell you the truth, the physics truth, not the comforting lie. The pattern that is you will dissolve. The particular configuration of field excitations that creates your experience, your memories, your personality, that will end. The wave will fall. That specific dance of the universe will stop. And I'm not going to tell you that you'll go to heaven or reincarnate or continue as a ghost. I don't believe that. The evidence doesn't support it. When your brain stops, the pattern that creates your consciousness stops. That's it. But here's what doesn't stop. The field, the ocean, the atoms that were part of your body, they don't disappear. They scatter. They become part of other patterns. The energy that maintained your structure, it doesn't vanish. It redistributes. Some of it radiates as heat. Some of it goes into the bacteria and insects that decompose your body. Some of it eventually ends up in plants, in animals, in other people. You don't go somewhere. You become other things. The wave doesn't survive the ocean. The wave is the ocean, temporarily pretending to be separate. And when the wave falls, the ocean continues, already waving up new patterns. Does this comfort you? I don't know. It comforts me. Because it means death isn't annihilation. It's transformation. It's the universe rearranging itself, the way it's always been rearranging itself. You're not precious cargo that's going to be lost. You're part of the dance, and the dance continues with or without this particular step. And here's the thing that really matters. If you're not a fixed thing, if you're a process, a pattern, a wave, then you've been dying all along. The you from 10 years ago, that pattern is gone. The cells in your body have almost all been replaced. The thoughts and beliefs and memories you had, many of them have changed or faded. You've been dissolving and reforming constantly your entire life. Death is just the moment when the pattern dissolves and doesn't reform. But if you've been dying all along, then you've also been being born all along. Every moment you're a new collapse of the wave function. Every breath is a new you, emerging from possibility into actuality. You're not one thing persisting through time. You're a series of related patterns, connected by memory and continuity, but each one genuinely new. This means the fear of death is partly a confusion. You're afraid of losing something you never had. Permanent, solid, unchanging existence. You've been temporary all along. You've been provisional all along. You've been quantum all along. Death just makes it obvious. And when you really get this, when you stop trying to be permanent, something shifts. You start to appreciate this moment, this collapse, this particular configuration of the universe that's happening right now. because it's never going to happen exactly this way again. This conversation we're having right now, this specific pattern of information exchange, it's unique in the history of the cosmos. When it ends, it's gone. Not somewhere else, just gone, dissolved back into possibility. And that makes it precious, not in a desperate, clinging way, but in a gentle, appreciative way. Like watching a sunset. You don't try to make the sunset stay. You don't feel like the sunset is being taken from you when it ends. You just watch it, appreciate it, let it be what it is. And when it's over, you carry the memory, and you know there will be other sunsets, different but just as beautiful. You're a sunset. You're a song playing. You're a wave rolling in. And trying to make that permanent, trying to make that last forever, that's the source of so much suffering. Because it can't last. It was never meant to last. It's beautiful because it's temporary. It matters because it's brief. So what do you do with this? How do you live with the knowledge that you're not solid, not separate, not permanent? How do you function day to day when you know you're just a pattern in a field, a wave in an ocean, a temporary excitation that's going to dissolve? Here's what I've learned. You live like it matters anyway. You love people even though they're going to die. You create things even though they're going to fade. You show up fully for this moment, this collapse, this brief flicker of actuality, because this is all there is. There is no deeper level where the real permanent you is waiting. This is it. This temporary, quantum, uncertain, relational process. This is what real is. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to make it permanent, when you stop trying to protect yourself from change and loss and death, you actually feel more alive. Because you're not wasting energy fighting reality. You're not exhausting yourself trying to turn the wave into a particle. You're waving. You're doing what the universe does. And there's a relief in that, a rightness, a coming home. Let me give you some practices. Some things you can actually do to start living from this understanding. First practice, the observer meditation. This is simple but profound. Once a day, sit quietly for just 60 seconds and notice that you're noticing. Watch thoughts appear in your mind. Don't follow them. Don't engage with them. Just observe them arising. Watch sensations appear in your body. Notice sounds, feelings, images. And as you're watching all this, notice the watcher. Notice the part of you that's aware of awareness. Here's what this does. It starts to distinguish between the pattern and the field. The thoughts, the sensations, the emotions, those are the pattern. The awareness observing them, that's closer to the field. And as you practice this, you start to identify less with the pattern and more with the field. You start to realize, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my body, I'm not even my sense of self. All of those are patterns arising in something vaster, something that doesn't change, something that was here before this particular configuration arose and will be here after it dissolves. This isn't spiritual bypassing. I'm not telling you to detach from life or pretend your pain doesn't matter. I'm telling you to see yourself accurately. You're both the wave and the ocean. You're both the pattern and the field. And when you can rest in the field part, even for a moment, the wave part becomes less desperate, less clingy, less afraid. Second practice, the relational check-in. Once a day, stop and ask yourself, who am I being right now? Not in judgment, just in curiosity. Are you being efficient, scattered, vulnerable, defended, creative, anxious? Just notice. And then notice how that changes based on context. Who are you with your partner versus with your boss? Who are you when you're creating something versus when you're consuming social media? Who are you in the morning versus late at night? And as you notice all these different versions, remind yourself, these are all real. These are all legitimate collapses of who you are. You're not being fake in some situations and authentic in others. You're being quantum. You're context-dependent. And that's okay. That's what everything in the universe is. This practice does two things. First, it reduces shame. You stop beating yourself up for being inconsistent or not knowing who you are. Second, it increases flexibility. When you recognize that you're different in different contexts, you can start to consciously choose which contexts to put yourself in. You can start to notice, oh, with this person I collapse into someone small and defended. Maybe I need less of that context, and with this person I collapse into someone creative and free. Maybe I need more of that. Third practice, the let it wave practice. This one's for when you're feeling anxious or controlling or like things are falling apart. When you're in that state, whisper to yourself, I'm a wave, not a rock. And then actually imagine yourself as water. Not metaphorically, really feel it. Imagine that your boundaries are permeable, that you can't be grasped, that you're always moving, always taking the shape of whatever container you're in, but never owned by it. Imagine that you're continuous with everything around you, flowing into and out of every situation. This is especially powerful in relationships. When you're fighting with someone, when you're trying to control them or make them stay or make them change, pause. I'm a wave, not a rock. They're a wave too. You can't hold water. You can't pin down a wave. All you can do is flow together for a while, or not. And either way is okay. Either way is just the ocean doing its thing. I know this sounds like it would make you passive, like you'd stop caring or trying, but it's the opposite. When you stop wasting energy trying to be solid, you have more energy for actually living. When you stop fighting change, you can actually steer through it. Surfers don't try to stop the wave. They ride it. They work with it. They use its energy. That's what you're learning to do. Fourth practice, the field awareness practice. This one's a little more advanced, but it's powerful. When you're with someone, a partner, a friend, even a stranger, take a moment to remember that you're not two separate objects. You're two excitations in the same field. Your electromagnetic field and their electromagnetic field are overlapping right now. You're exchanging photons constantly. You're literally, physically interacting at the quantum level. And then feel into that. Can you sense the space between you not as empty but as full? Full of interaction, of information exchange, of mutual arising? Can you feel yourself not as stopping at your skin but as extending out, field-like, blending into everything around you? This isn't woo. This is physics. The fields are real. The interaction is real. And when you start to feel it, when you start to sense yourself as field rather than particle, something softens. The boundaries get less rigid. The fear of the other gets less intense. You start to experience other people not as threats or resources, but as other waves in the same ocean, other patterns in the same field. And from that place, compassion becomes natural. It's not something you have to force or work at. It's just obvious. Hurting them is hurting the field. Helping them is helping the field. And since you're the field too, it all comes back to the same ocean. Now, I want to address something. You might be thinking, okay, this is beautiful, Feynman, but how do I pay my rent with this? How does this help me with my actual problems? And I hear you. This isn't going to magically solve your practical problems. If you're broke, understanding quantum mechanics doesn't make you not broke. If you're sick, knowing you're a wave doesn't cure you. This isn't a replacement for practical action. But here's what it does. It changes your relationship to your problems. See, most of your suffering isn't the actual problem. It's your resistance to the problem, your story about what the problem means about you, your fear that the problem will be permanent or will destroy you. When you understand that you're not a fixed thing, that you're a process constantly changing, then problems become less existential. They're not threats to your core being. They're just the current configuration of the field. Unpleasant, sure. Something to work on, definitely. But not a statement about your fundamental worth or nature. You're not broken when you have problems. You're not failing at life. You're just in a part of the wave cycle that's difficult. And waves go up and down. That's what they do. You haven't stopped being a wave just because you're in a trough. And this shifts how you approach solving problems. When you're not in a desperate fight to prove you're okay or to protect your identity, you have more mental space for creative solutions. When you're not collapsing yourself into, "I'm the kind of person who has this problem," you're more free to become someone who doesn't have this problem. Remember, you're quantum. You're not fixed. You can collapse into a different configuration. Let me tell you about a time this helped me. I was stuck on a problem in physics. Really stuck. I'd been working on it for months, and I couldn't see the solution. And I was starting to make it mean something about me. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought. Maybe I'm past my prime. Maybe I'm a fraud. And then one day I was taking a walk, not thinking about the problem, just watching the trees move in the wind. And I had this thought. Trees don't worry about whether they're good trees. They just grow. They respond to sunlight, to water, to wind. They don't have a concept of themselves as a thing that could succeed or fail at being a tree. They're just treeing. And I realized, I'm doing the same thing. I'm physicsing. Sometimes the physicsing goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But it's not a statement about me as a thing. It's just what's happening right now in this particular configuration of the field. And with that realization, the pressure released. I stopped trying so hard. I let my mind wave around the problem instead of trying to force it into a solution. And a week later, the answer came. Not because I worked harder, but because I stopped collapsing myself into person who must solve this problem to be worthy, and just let myself be person who's curious about this problem. That's what this understanding gives you. Not solutions to your problems, but a different way of being with your problems. A way that's more fluid, more curious, less desperate. And paradoxically, from that less desperate place, you're often more effective. So let's talk about some common objections you might have. Some ways your brain might be trying to wiggle out of this. Objection 1. If nothing is solid and everything is just patterns, then why does anything matter? Why not just do whatever I want? Why be moral? And this is a good question. If we're just temporary configurations of fields, if there's no permanent self, then what grounds ethics? What makes anything matter? Here's my answer. Things matter because they affect the field. When you hurt someone, you're creating a disturbance in the field. You're collapsing their wave function in a way that increases their suffering, their disorder, their chaos. And since you're part of the same field, that disturbance affects everything, including you. Ethics isn't about following rules handed down by a god or a society. It's about recognizing that we're all patterns in the same ocean, and the health of any part affects the health of the whole. Compassion isn't a nice add-on. It's an accurate perception of reality. Hurting others is hurting yourself, not metaphorically but actually, because the separation is an illusion. And things matter because they matter to you right now. The fact that you're temporary doesn't make your experience less real. Pain hurts right now. Love feels good right now. Meaning is something you experience right now. The fact that it's all going to end doesn't negate the reality of it in this moment. Would you say a song doesn't matter because it ends? Would you say a sunset isn't beautiful because it's temporary? The temporariness is part of what makes it matter, what makes it precious. Objection 2. This sounds like you're saying nothing is real, that it's all just my imagination or consciousness creating reality. No, I'm not saying that. The fields are real, the interactions are real, the patterns are real. What I'm saying is that the patterns aren't as solid, as separate, as permanent as they appear. But they're not illusions. They're real patterns in a real field. Consciousness doesn't create the universe. The universe creates consciousness. You're a way the universe has of knowing itself, but you're not making it up. You're discovering it, participating in it, being it. The idealists, the people who think reality is all in the mind, have it backwards. It's not that matter is made of mind, it's that mind is made of matter. Or more accurately, mind and matter are both made of something more fundamental: interaction, relationship, information exchange in fields. Objection 3. If I'm not a fixed self, if I'm just a collection of patterns, then who's responsible for my actions? Can I just say, that wasn't the real me? That was just one collapse of my wave function? Nice try, but no. You're responsible for all of it. All the collapses, all the patterns, all the versions of you. They're all you. You're not a particle with a fixed identity, but you're not nothing either. You're a consistent pattern, a recognizable set of tendencies and responses. And more importantly, you're a pattern that can learn, that can change, that can choose to put yourself in contexts that collapse you in healthier ways. You're not a passive victim of context. You're a participant in it. You're part of what creates the context. So yeah, you're responsible. Not because you're an unchanging agent making free choices from outside the causal chain, but because you're part of the causal chain, and your patterns affect other patterns, and you can shape those patterns through intention and practice. Now let's go deeper into something I touched on earlier, the relationship between physics and mysticism. Because I know some of you are hearing this and thinking, this sounds like Buddhism. This sounds like Taoism. This sounds like mystical stuff dressed up in physics language. And you're not wrong. There are similarities. When the Buddhists talk about no self, about impermanence, about interdependence, they're pointing at something real. When the Taoists talk about the Tao, the way, the flowing nature of reality, they're pointing at something real. They didn't have the math we have. They didn't have the experimental evidence, but they looked deeply at their own experience, at the nature of consciousness and reality, and they saw something true. Here's the difference. I'm not asking you to take this on faith. I'm not asking you to believe it because some ancient sage said it or because it feels spiritually satisfying. I'm showing you the experiments. I'm showing you the math. I'm showing you that this is what reality actually does when you look closely enough. The reason mystical experiences feel like they're revealing deep truth is because they are. When people meditate deeply, when they have psychedelic experiences, when they have near-death experiences, one common report is the feeling of boundaries dissolving. The sense of being separate evaporates. They feel themselves as part of everything, as the universe looking at itself. And materialist scientists often dismiss this as just neurons firing, just chemicals in the brain, not real. But those scientists have it backwards. The normal waking consciousness, where you feel separate and solid, that's the brain creating a useful fiction. The mystical experience, where boundaries dissolve, that's closer to what's actually there. That's the brain temporarily dropping the interface and letting you glimpse the field. I'm not saying mystical experiences are perfectly accurate. They come with their own distortions, their own interpretations, but they're not just hallucinations. They're valid perceptions of a deeper level of reality, accessed through a different method than physics, but pointing at the same territory. And this is why I think the integration of science and spirituality is so important. Science gives us the rigorous, testable mathematical framework. Spirituality gives us the lived, embodied, transformative experience. We need both. You can know quantum mechanics intellectually and still live like you're a separate particle. You need the practice, the meditation, the direct experience to really embody it. But you also need the physics to not get lost in fuzzy thinking or make claims that aren't actually supported by reality. So when I'm telling you you're a wave in a field, I'm not being poetic. But I'm also not being coldly reductive. I'm trying to point at something that's both scientifically accurate and personally meaningful, both true and transformative. Let me tell you one more story, and then we'll bring this home. This is a story about my father. My father wasn't a scientist. He was a uniform salesman, but he was curious about the world, and he taught me how to look at things, how to ask questions. We'd go for walks when I was a kid, and he'd point at birds or rocks or streams, and he'd ask me questions, not to test me, but to help me see. Why do you think that bird has that color feather? What do you think makes the water move that way? And if I didn't know, he'd make up stories, wild speculations, and then we'd laugh about how we didn't really know, but wasn't it interesting to wonder? And one day we were lying on our backs in the grass, looking up at clouds, and I asked him, "Dad, what are we? What are people made of?" And he said, "Well, your body is made of atoms, tiny little things too small to see, and those atoms used to be in other things, in the dirt, in the air, in food. They go around and around. Nothing is really created or destroyed, it just changes form." And even then, even as a kid, I thought that was beautiful, that we're not separate from the world, that we're made of the same stuff as everything else, that we're recycled stardust, borrowed atoms that will go back into the world when we're done with them. My father died 20 years ago. And when I think about him now, I don't imagine him in some afterlife looking down on me. I think about the atoms that were part of him, now part of other things, some of them in me, passed on when I inherited his watch and held it close, some of them in the ground, feeding plants that feed animals that feed people. He's not gone. He's redistributed. He's still part of the dance. And that's not a cold thought to me. It's warm. It's connected. It means he's still here, just in a different configuration. The pattern that was my father, the collection of memories and habits and ways of being that I called Dad, that dissolved. But the stuff he was made of, the fields he was an excitation in, those continue. And the way he shaped me, the patterns he created in my neurons through all our conversations and walks, those continue too. He's alive in me, not metaphorically, literally. I'm a continuation of the pattern he started. And that's what all of us are. We're continuations of patterns that have been waving through the universe since the beginning. The atoms in your body were forged in stars. The patterns in your brain were shaped by millions of years of evolution and years of your own experience. You're not new. You're ancient. You're the universe doing what it's been doing for 14 billion years, organizing itself into ever more complex patterns. And you're not the end point. You're a middle step. The patterns you create, the way you shape the people around you, the ideas you share, the things you make, those will continue after you're gone. You're not trying to leave a permanent mark. Nothing is permanent. But you're part of the flow, part of the passing forward of pattern and complexity and beauty. So here's where we land. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. You're not made of matter. You're made of mattering. You're made of relationships, interactions, the constant exchange of influence and energy. You're a verb that learned to love itself. You're the universe looking back at itself from this particular angle, this particular configuration. And that means several things. 1, you were never separate. The loneliness you feel is real, but it's based on a misperception. You're already connected at the deepest level. What you're lacking is actualized connection, collapsed interaction. The solution isn't to find your missing piece. It's to interact more fully with the field you're already part of. 2, you were never permanent. The anxiety about change, about losing yourself, about death, it's based on trying to be something you were never meant to be. You're a wave. You're supposed to rise and fall. Trying to stay at the crest forever is fighting reality. Let yourself wave. 3, you were never supposed to find yourself. You're not lost. You're quantum. You're different in different contexts, and all of those versions are real. Stop trying to pin yourself down to one true self. Instead, get curious about how you collapse in different situations and consciously choose contexts that collapse you in ways you like. 4, you're not broken. All this anxiety, all this searching, all this feeling like something's wrong with you, it's not because you're defective. It's because you're trying to be a particle when you're actually a wave. The moment you start living as the fluid, relational, temporary process you actually are, the struggle eases. 5. Control is violence. The more you try to nail things down, yourself, other people, your future, the more you're fighting the quantum nature of reality. The alternative isn't to be passive, it's to be participatory. You can't control the wave, but you can surf it. You can't control other people, but you can create contexts where you both collapse in beautiful ways. And 6. Death is transformation, not annihilation. You're going to die. That pattern is going to dissolve. But the field continues. The ocean continues. You're not going anywhere because you were never separate to begin with. And in the meantime, right now, this moment, this collapse, this is it. This is all there is. So be here. Be present. Let yourself matter. I started this video talking about touch, about how your hand has never actually touched another person. And I want to come back to that now, at the end, because I want to reframe it. Yes, at the level of particles, nothing touches. But at the level of fields, everything is always touching. Right now, you're immersed in the electromagnetic fields of everything around you. The device you're watching this on, the air around you, the planet beneath you, you're interpenetrating with all of it. You're always in contact. You've never not been in contact. And when you hold someone's hand, when you hug someone, when you're close to someone you love, what's happening is the field of you and the field of them are overlapping, interacting, exchanging information at an incredible rate. The particular pattern of field excitation that you are is mixing with the particular pattern that they are. You're creating a new, combined pattern that couldn't exist without both of you. That's what intimacy is. Not the illusion of particle contact, but the reality of field interpenetration. Not two things touching, but one field dancing with itself in a new configuration. So when someone you love touches you, what you're feeling isn't the sensation of matter meeting matter. What you're feeling is the field reorganizing itself, recognizing itself, collapsing into a new pattern that includes both of you. You're feeling the universe loving itself through the particular forms of you and them. And that's not less real than physical touch. It's more real. It's what's actually happening underneath the appearance of solid bodies in contact. You're not alone. You've never been alone. You're a wave in an ocean of waves, and every wave is made of the same water. Separation is an illusion created by your nervous system to help you navigate the world. But it's not the truth. The truth is interpenetration, interdependence, mutual arising. And when you really get that, when you really feel that in your bones, everything softens. The grasping stops. The fear quiets. Not because you've become enlightened or transcended your humanity, but because you've finally seen yourself accurately. You've finally stopped fighting what you are. So here's my invitation to you. Stop trying to be solid. Stop trying to be separate. Stop trying to be permanent. You're not a rock. You're water. You're music. You're a conversation the universe is having with itself. Let yourself wave. And if this landed, if something in you recognized itself in what I've said, leave a comment. Tell me what you're waving through right now. Tell me what you're learning to let go of. Tell me how you're practicing being fluid in a world that wants you to be fixed. Hit that like button if you're tired of pretending to be a particle. Subscribe if you want to keep exploring what it means to be human, to be conscious, to be this particular collection of stardust temporarily aware of itself before dissolving back into the everything it never actually left. You're not separate. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're exactly what the universe is doing in this particular spot, at this particular moment. And that's enough. You're enough. Not because you're special or chosen or permanently significant, but because you're real, right now. And that's all anything ever is. Thank you for being here. Thank you for waving with me for these few minutes. I'll see you in the next one. Or rather, we'll continue being each other, different waves in the same ocean, briefly pretending to be separate so we can have the joy of recognizing each other again. Now go live like the quantum being you are. Go be the verb you've always been. Go wave.